What is up, team? Hey, guys. Hope you're doing well wherever you are watching this. Welcome in to Quarantine Catch Up. My name's David. I got a very special guest today, my bud, Mr. Greg Dummer with Global Tax Network. Greg, how you doing, man?
I'm doing wonderful, Deputy Dave. It's great to see you again.
Yeah, thank you so much. I forgot my sheriff's badge, my deputy badge. So sorry, I'm off the job right now. So
Okay.
well, it's good to see you, man. I'm glad to catch up with you. I know you're coming in from San Diego, right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
you guys recently moved there a few months ago?
So we moved to San Diego about 2 years ago,
Two
from
years ago.
Minneapolis.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Okay.
we're it's a great place to quarantine.
Yeah, yeah.
There are worse places.
No doubt. That's for sure. That's for sure. Awesome, man. Well, you and I were kind of on the same circuit. We see each other at different sectors of our industry. Obviously, you're on the tax side, I'm on the moving side, but I really do always enjoy catching up with you and maybe toasting an IPA or two. But that's
Absolutely.
it, one or two.
We
And
stop
then
it from there. Yeah.
I know, but if we can't do that in person, I guess this is the next best thing. So appreciate you joining, man.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you've seen these before, I always kick it off, kind of an icebreaker, attention grabber. We're gonna kick it off with the Fast Five. Five not so hard hitting questions. Just aim to get to know you a little bit better, Greg. And I will let everyone watching know that I asked Greg before this, hey, do you want to know the questions? He said, no, absolutely not. Bring it on. I was like,
I may
okay.
regret that. So
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. They're all super hard hitting. So, yeah, we'll see. All right, Greg, are you ready for the Fast Five?
Yep, let's do it.
All right, bring it on. Okay, number one. This is a question I've asked a lot of folks that I've had on just because I think it's interesting. I think it gives us a peek into your personality. What, not necessarily your favorite book that you've read, but what is a book that you would give as a gift to someone else? So something that you found, inspirational, motivational, educational, whatever it may be.
I would say The Alchemist by Paulo
Yeah.
Coelho.
Yeah.
I think it's a really good book. I think a lot of people, I mean, I've read it multiple times, and every time I read it, it's a different message.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really a book about pursuing your dream and following your heart at the same time. And I feel like those are two really important ingredients in life.
I love that, man. We're getting deep right off the bat. All right, number two. This is another really deep question, so I hope you're prepared. Okay, if you had to sing karaoke, you're forced to sing karaoke. What is your go-to karaoke song?
Well, first of all, I've never been forced to sing karaoke because I do it all
Okay,
the time.
you volunteer. Okay.
Secondly, I have one of the worst voices, but I have got liquid courage typically.
Yeah.
And I spend a lot of time in Asia. So my go-to was always California Girls because I felt like I had to represent the U.S. and
All right.
wherever I was, and
Yeah.
then Journey. But if Steve Perry ever heard me, I think he would.
Okay, you're not in danger of being the lead singer of Journey.
No, never.
Okay, fair enough. All right, all right. Number three. Okay, for you guys that don't know this, Greg's quite the athlete. Greg was a collegiate athlete, played football. I didn't realize this, the winningest program in NCAA history. Is that correct? It's not.
Yeah,
All right.
winningest coach. So the winningest coach in NCAA history, and he
Winningest
coached
coach.
for.
Okay, yeah. So across all divisions.
Yeah, and he
So
coached for
not
50 years.
Alabama, not Clemson, where I went to.
Yes.
Not what you would think of, but where was it?
It was at St. John's University in Minnesota. So
Yeah.
he passed at one point Eddie Robinson from Grambling. So he was the leader prior to John Gallardi's his name, and then he took over.
Okay. All right. Very cool.
Yeah.
So I'll give you, would you rather question here related to that. And we'll get into this too, kind of in your career, a midpoint kind of in your career progression. You started being pretty serious with triathlons, right? Competing in
Yes.
triathlons. Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah. So
absolutely.
I want to hear a little bit about that later, but okay. Would you rather? So here's the mindset: football and triathlons. Would you rather catch a touchdown pass in a Super Bowl, or would you rather win the Ironman?
Oh, that's a tough one. I would say win the Ironman.
Oh, okay.
And probably the money would go with the football, and that's a wonderful sport. But there's so much work that goes into competing at a high level in triathlon, and the people that actually do it, I feel like it's an honor. So I would say that right now, but if you asked me 20 years ago, I'd probably say the touchdown and the Super
Okay.
Bowl.
Okay. Good
And
enough.
by the way, they both would be cool. So if I'm
Yeah.
hedging
Yeah.
my bets.
And the Ironman's in Kona, right?
Yeah, Kona.
Yeah.
Yeah, Kona,
Ironman World
Hawaii.
Championships. Yeah. Very cool. Okay. Good answer. All right. Number 4. Okay. This one's not so much a specific question, but I'm just hoping to share a little background. I remember a story you told me that you traveled, I think, what is the most consecutive days that you've traveled internationally? And we'll get into this. We'll get into this a little bit later. But you've had roles in your career where heavy international travel. Where you told
Yeah.
me one time you were out, I forget, maybe South America, and you got something from the home office from headquarters, and they said, "Well, while you're out of the country, why don't you head over to Europe?" Or what?
Oh yeah.
Right?
I've done that more than a few times.
Wow.
I think I was, I guess, if we go into the mobility industry, I would be what you call a stealth expat many
Yeah.
times. And I
Yeah.
feel like I would be the nemesis of every global mobility manager back in the
Where in
day.
the world is Greg Dummer?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, no, I've done one where I did 3 continents in one trip, and
Wow.
part of it, from Asia, South America, and then to Dubai.
Wow.
So that
So
was,
how long in total were you gone?
that one was about 3.5 weeks.
Wow.
And it was supposed to be a 10-day trip.
Wow.
Yeah. So.
And you didn't have like a cat or anything at home, right?
No, I was young and single, and quite
Yeah.
frankly, I was living in Western Pennsylvania at the time, and I didn't have any reason to stay there, so I was always open for.
You're like, sure, yeah, I'll go. Yeah, no big deal.
Yeah.
Okay, good to know. Wow. All right, number 5. Okay, just wanted to pick your brain here for a second. So number 5, no limitations, no restrictions. And I know that, and I think you've got a pretty cool, unique perspective within our industry because your career has gone through a couple different industries. So if you had to start all over again, you're coming out of St. John's, you're 22, 23-year-old Greg. What career would you choose for yourself? No limitations.
That is a good question. I guess when I came out, I thought I'd always be like a high school history teacher and a football coach.
Yeah.
That was kind of what I thought, and then.
Yeah.
Then I became an expat in a different world. But I feel like what I'd want to do, like, and then, every decade, I feel like you become a different person. Maybe it's every 5 years. It's,
Yeah.
Right now, I feel like I'd want to impact children. I feel like I'm very fortunate, and I have 3 daughters, and they're very fortunate by circumstances that are beyond their control with just the way we were born. And I feel like there's so many kids that don't have the influences for them to be able to get the right start in life. So
Right.
that children would be really, and we grew up, my family was a foster family. So we had about 28 children, and I had to share a room for most of my life when I was
Wow.
growing up.
Wow.
And at the time I didn't like it
Yeah.
because I was sharing my parents' love and, in a room, and sometimes they're older than me. But I think, that was, my mother always said, she goes, if the worst thing we can do is show someone love and what love is, then we did our part. And so I feel like my career and what I've done since then has been, quite frankly, selfish. I mean, I've raised a family and all that stuff, but I feel like it's time to expand a little bit more. So
Yeah.
happy children somehow.
Yeah, I love that answer, man. And thanks for sharing that. I didn't realize that. But what a cool foundation that, and like you said, you're self-aware enough to say, man, I did not appreciate this at the time, but
Yeah,
an awesome foundation that your parents laid down for you. That's really cool.
absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, thanks for sharing. All right. That was a fast 5. That got deeper than I thought we were going to get there. Man, that's awesome. Well, that's a good segue to, talking about you coming out of school and you, thinking initially, hey, I'd like to work with kids in high school and coach football. Coming out of school and being an athlete, what was your mentality? How did you get into that first career and eventually become an expat?
Well, I came in the first career, and I think, I guess, there's a choice between, money and then, your passion. And I was an econ major in college. And so I kind of pursued both roles. I mean, I was a minor in history, and so I was going to go down the teaching. But then I got an opportunity with a bank, Norwest Bank, now called Wells Fargo. And, it was by a former athlete from my school, and he recruited me and says, you'd be great for this position. So I lasted 3 or 4 months, and I was miserable.
Yeah.
And it was not for me, that whole position. And so I was just wanting to find something new. I got a call from my dad used to run sales and marketing for Red Wing Shoe Company, which is where I'm from, Red Wing, Minnesota. And it's nepotism, unless my dad didn't even know about it. So one of the gentlemen who worked for him ran the European offices, and he was just creating an office in Switzerland. And he says, Greg, and I used to spend some summers in Egypt when I was a kid at his ranch.
Wow.
In Egypt. So it was like we knew each other very well. And he says, I just need some help. I need somebody to come over here for 3 to 6 months, just carry the bags. We have a warehouse in Amsterdam, or near outside of Amsterdam, and I need your help counting the shoes. And he goes, would you do it?
Yeah.
And I said, done. So my dad didn't even know. So literally I got what we told him subsequently, a few weeks later, and I was gone. And that started my career. And I spent about 2.5 years in Switzerland.
Wow.
And then by the end of it, I was basically running sales, opening accounts in probably 20 countries, where
Wow.
I had this turquoise blue Mitsubishi Colt that's like a hatchback with a two-lay topper of shoe samples.
Nice.
And I would go around from Germany to the Benelux countries to France, and I would go from town centers, and I'd knock on the doors, and I'd have shoe samples and I'd really botch multiple languages, but I started to develop accounts, and
Wow.
I did that for quite some time.
But not only, I started my sales career out, cold calling like a lot of people do. But yeah, you were not only cold calling, but you're going door to door in different countries, different cultures. Man, I'm sure that was like an incredible learning experience, not just like in sales, but just like human behavior, how to interact.
Oh yeah. Yeah. One of the biggest things I've learned, and I've always felt, it's like growth happens out of your comfort zone. And I feel like, when I find myself getting complacent, and I almost sabotage myself to reinforce that. And sometimes they've been good decisions and sometimes not, but I feel like that was one of my first ones. Yeah. You're you're on your comfort zone a lot.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Interesting, man. Interesting. So, okay. So that's a 3 to 6 month initially assignment, and that turns into 2 years.
Yeah, it turned into 2 years, and I think it worked well. So my boss, he was Egyptian, and initially he had difficulties. We were trying to open up the opportunity in the Ukraine and Poland, and he couldn't get a visa. So the last minute, there was a big meeting, and we were trying to get a distributor there, who was also a distributor for like Nike and Timberland. So they were the big deal. And so he couldn't go. And he says last minute, he goes, Greg, I need you to go fly to a small town called Poznan in Poland. And I said, okay. So, I had my passport. I flew there. And over the course of, I flew there, I didn't know the language. And this town only had one hotel. It was in 1993. So it had just opened up from the Cold War. And so they dropped off my bags. I went to a dinner. And there was, around the table, there was 6 guys from Poland, 5 guys from the Ukraine, and 1 Brit. And he was the president of Clark Shoes, which is a shoe company.
Sure, yeah.
And this is my first introduction to international business, because we went around the table. Everybody had a bottle of vodka and a pitcher of grapefruit juice. Okay. And we went around and did toasts. You can imagine if there's 11 or 12 people there, how many toasts and you drink.
No kidding. Wow.
And over the course of 3 days, we did this because there was a shoe show or whatever. And I didn't know what I was doing, but I did realize what I was doing is I was developing a relationship and trust. Right. And that's what it, especially pre-internet, that's what it was based on. So I ended up landing a very large deal for our company based on this. And they bought, like, I don't even remember what it was, but it was over $1 million worth of shoes, which was a big deal.
Yeah.
Coming back, I was kind of sheepishly because I didn't think I did much. And I told my boss that, and he goes, all right, Greggy, he goes, you're in charge. So he gave me he goes, you do the Benelux countries. And so I literally got up there with my little car and I started driving around there, and then I just kept expanding it. So did that for over 2 years. Then I realized that international was a passion of mine. And so that's when I went to a business school called Thunderbird. Yeah. It's in Arizona. And I think that was the start of my first, I've had like multiple careers, but that was the start of my first career where international was a focus.
Yeah. And so when you're getting your MBA there at Thunderbird, did you do that full time? Were you working full time still? Or?
Yes, I did it full time. And it was literally one of the best experiences of my life. partly because you work for a few years,
Yeah.
and then you realize that even though I enjoyed work, it's not everything. And then if you're able to take 2 years of your time, and then you're able to, and it was a very unique situation, especially at the time where everybody was cloistered on this small campus in Glendale, Arizona.
Mm.
People from 50 countries were there, and it was just a melting pot of just excitement, ideas. And there was parties every night, many of them different themes of different countries, and I felt like that was just a great experience. I think in the end, like I'm from a small town in Minnesota, I did have some experiences to travel, but it really opens your eyes to how, number one, how big the world is, but two, how similar we all are. I mean, everybody has a very similar hopes, dreams, aspirations. And I feel like, that was able to launch my career because I realized that, you're meeting with people, and that's really what they are. They may sound, look, and eat differently than you do, but
Hmm.
in the end, if you can find that core, commonality, I feel like, you're on your way.
Yeah, absolutely. As far as building a bridge to someone and finding, yeah, common things with them.
Yeah.
Okay, so you finish that program, and the idea there, your mindset is you're coming out, you've got your MBA. The idea there is like, I want to be involved in some sort of, international business. Was it
Yep.
specific to any kind of industry or just?
No, no, I just wanted to conquer the world. So,
Yeah, no doubt.
I got an opportunity. It's now Schneider Electric, but it was at
Sure.
the time it was called British Tire and Rubber, which then became Invensys. So it was a large British conglomerate. They had purchased a couple companies in the U.S., multiple companies, and one of them was the old Rockwell, the energy metering
Hmm.
business.
Yeah.
So, and at one point they made the infinite choice to move all sales and marketing out of Pittsburgh and put it into where the actual factory was.
Mm.
And that was right when I did it. So I had lived in a small town in Western Pennsylvania for a few years called Dubois, Pennsylvania. It's
Mm.
about 45 minutes from State College, but it's in the middle of nowhere.
Wow.
And but the most wonderful people I've ever met. They're just salt of the earth. And my job was a director of international sales. So basically, we had 96 distributors around the world, many of which have never been seen, for years. And so my job was really to kind of weed them out and figure out who was a fit, who wasn't, and we started to determine where our core countries we want to focus on. So I, like, from a global mobility, I've committed to probably every area known to mankind trying to build this.
Right.
But
Right.
it was a great experience, and like out of your comfort zone. I mean, like you'd be in Malaysia for the first time. I mean,
Yeah.
I've been, there's a lot of things that I can even say over a beer or probably can say, but I've had a lot of experiences, and
Sure.
but it was great. So I did that for a few years.
Yeah, yeah. So, and this is just for me, out of Du Bois, Pennsylvania. Where do you fly out of there to get?
Well, this was, yeah. So they actually had a small regional airport, just
Okay.
like your typical, literally like just small planes,
Yeah.
mainly Pittsburgh,
Okay.
but then also Cleveland quite a bit. I would drive, and I could drive to Pittsburgh in 2 hours, and Cleveland in three.
Okay.
But then they weren't really international gateways, so I had to fly, then go to whether it's O'Hare, which I will never want. O'Hare has a bad experience in my mind because I always got delayed,
Yeah.
or if it's JFK or Newark, where the areas that I flew out of primarily.
Sure. I think a lot of us have had negative experiences at O'Hare. So we're not throwing O'Hare, yeah, under the bus at all. But
Yeah.
okay, so you do that a couple of years, and you're still like in this international business mode.
Yeah,
Traveling
and
a
then
lot.
sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, traveling a lot. You and I have talked about this before, where you flow. You told me before I hit the record button that you've flown 300,000 miles for 10 years straight. Is that right?
Pretty much, yeah, absolutely. And
Wow.
so then I moved to so then this was the at the during and I love Western Pennsylvania, but at the same time, socially, it was not, the for a young single guy,
Sure.
there's other horizons out there. And so this was during the dot-com era. And almost everybody, I probably had 50 friends that lived in San Francisco at the time.
Mhm.
And I said, that's where I want to go. So I got a job there, and it was a company that we basically built products and we serviced the technology industry. So I was there, and I ran the worldwide Microsoft and Intel accounts. And so for the next 3 years there, while I lived in San Francisco, I continued to fly 300,000 miles a year,
Wow.
servicing these accounts. And but it was still great. I mean, I felt like I had the best of both worlds, and I saw the world. But that's a lonely experience. I mean, I think when you travel that much, you see the world, but it's a lot of hotels and airports, and then a lot of introspection. And I felt like at some point I wanted to make a change. So then when I was there, I made one flight. I literally flew directly from Buenos Aires into Denver. I don't have to go somewhere, and I wanted to see my sister lives in Denver, and so does my and my niece. I had two nephews, one at the time. And I wanted to see them. And so we're going to go to dinner. And my brother-in-law is a wonderful guy, but he's not the biggest conversationalist at dinner. So
Yeah.
my sister, who was a nurse at Children's Hospital in Denver, said, "You know what? I want you to meet one of my friends." And so I said, "All right," and thinking if she was trying to set me up, I would be out of there because I had no interest.
Right.
And so my now wife was the other one at the dinner who was going to
Wow.
bring her boyfriend at the time, but he elected not to go. So it ended up just being
Wow.
us four. So we were, so what there was launched a 6-month courtship. My wife was in Denver, and then she went did her fellowship at Harvard for 4 years in Boston. So soon after we met, 2 months later, she moved to Boston. So we did for about 6 months the San Francisco, Boston circuit.
Wow. But
But
you had plenty of miles, right?
I
To
think I had over two
back and forth.
million miles in United alone at one point. So
Wow.
yeah. But I went through those pretty quickly. But
Sure. Yeah. Cross country flights. So you guys meet, and and I just think it's interesting. That's one reason I wanted to have you on, Greg. I know I told you about this, but I just think it's super interesting how you've gone to kind of different industries. And of course, I think it's been fairly consistent with a sales role, right?
yep,
Most of those industries, and
yep.
obviously, sales that those skills, translate across, everything really. But did you ever think, that you wanted to get back to, shoes, or you wanted to get back to, software, or was there anything?
Yeah. I probably should have in retrospect, because then you could truly build and launch your career. But I felt like the opportunities kind of presented themselves. And,
Yeah,
I've been in some botched up, startups that didn't make it. So then you look back and it's like, wow, the friends that stayed at this old company, they're moving up and they're, more stable. But I feel like in the end, it was where I was drawn at the time. And, I mean, I try not to have regrets.
sure,
Because if you look at it, you always learn lessons and you learn about yourself. And so,
right.
um, but yeah, I think, my career was, there's multiple industries, and you have to reinvent yourself every time, which is
Oh yeah.
unique, and it's a challenge, but it's exciting too.
Well, and I think you can take your experiences and what works well and what doesn't work well, and say, hey, okay, let's apply that to Global Tax Network.
Absolutely.
How can I take my previous experiences and my previous roles and apply that to what I'm doing now?
Absolutely.
So okay, so we've met your wife now, and you guys are married, and you're starting a family. And this is something really cool too that I want to talk to you about. You guys made the decision as a family, because your wife is a physician, for you to stay home with the kids for a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it was initially four. So we've always had a nanny since we had children, and I was traveling quite a bit. And so during the 2008, 2009 recession, I'd started a completely new industry, which is the equipment leasing industry. And that's, not even close to travel any longer.
Yeah.
But I was told, we want to keep you, and to all the salespeople, but we can't pay you.
Huh,
So that
all
was
right.
like, and I
I
was
don't
like,
know
well,
about
that's
that
kind
deal.
of hard. And
Yeah.
that was 2 days, it was a week or two prior to our second daughter being born. And so at that time, I'm like, okay, well, I can stay home, and and there was job prospects weren't wonderful, but I had my feelers out, and every job I did get quite a few job offers, but they were all travel.
Mm,
And at that point, family was my priority, and I didn't want to have that life, and my wife worked a lot of hours, so that just wouldn't work. And so it kind of went after 3 months of this. Made the decision, yeah, I'd become a stay-at-home dad. And so I did that for 2.5 years.
wow.
And then we had our third daughter.
Wow.
So our second and third are only 13 months apart.
Yeah.
So, and I will say that, kudos to anybody that does this. It is the hardest job in the world,
Yeah.
for many, many reasons, but it's extremely humbling. You always have an identity, and your identity changes over life. But mine was more focused on career and building achievement. And then you
Right.
start doing this, and you're driving in a minivan, and you've got crushed goldfish in the back with stale milk, and diapers, and it's just you initially look at it and there's a lot, sometimes you're resentful, but at the same time you start looking at how, this is what life is, and what a blessing it is. And so I did that for 2.5 years, and it was a great experience. Personally, it was a very good experience.
Yeah.
And then it came to the point where um, it was the right time to move on. And I was ready for another challenge. So I kind of stayed in the same industry I was in, the equipment leasing industry.
Okay.
And then we found a wonderful nanny, and the kids probably were ready to move on as well. So
Yeah. You're like, Dad, don't you want to get back out there?
when I saw ties and iron shirts on my table that my kids would put, you knew
Yeah,
that something was
right.
happening.
Yeah,
So.
right. I think that's so cool. I mean, did you ever, and I think that's such a good point because it's not a fair comparison, but talking about identity and what self-awareness and how you view yourself. I mean, even just like what we're going through now,
Yeah.
and you and I, we're on the road a lot, and even just that part, as far as like, that's how I identified my role. And I'm like, hey, I build relationships, I cultivate relationships, I need to be in the room with people, and that's
Mm-hmm.
who I am. And I set up a trip 2 weeks at a time, I build that trip, it's built. Okay, what's the next trip 2 weeks after that? And then I build
Yes.
that, and that's kind of how I work. And so yeah, for me it was a real challenge, and again, it's not the same whatsoever, but just as far as like kind of going through that, as far as a little change in identity, and okay, like how do I approach the workday?
Right. Yeah, it's very different, and the world's changed. And I mean, it's like you can hope that it didn't happen, or you go with the flow and you move with it. And I mean, what you're doing here, this is wonderful. It's like there's still such a human, personal element, but it's just we have to do it differently now. So
Right, exactly. We just have
yeah,
to think a little bit creatively, I think, than we
absolutely.
did before. Okay, cool. So you go back to work. Your daughters are super happy that you go back to work.
Yep.
So how do we get into mobility? How do we get to
Well,
yeah?
so I did that for another 5 or 6 years, more or less. And so my wife was living we were in Minnesota at the time for about 12 years. And that's where my family's from. So I think we wanted to be around family. And, my wife's not from Minnesota. And I think, she's doesn't love winter. And you kind of have to be committed to winter
Yep.
if you're going to like it. And
Yep.
she has two sisters that are in Southern California. And she's like, it basically said, it's my time. So she found an opportunity at Rady Children's Hospital in San Diego. And on a whim, she's kind of flirted with this before, but on a whim, she said, I'm going to go interview. And this was on Valentine's Day. And I said, well, go ahead. So she went, and I believe they already hired the person they were looking for, but they loved her so much, they made a position. And so
Wow.
within a month, we had to make a decision whether she was going to take it or not.
Wow.
And it was it was even for less pay than she was making in Minnesota. And San Diego is a little bit more expensive,
Cost of
but
living, yeah.
but at the same time, it's like, it felt true to her. It was something she truly wanted to do. And I was happy with what I was doing, but at the same time, a happy wife is a happy life. And I mean, and you're kind of
Amen.
you're a partner in this. And
Yeah.
so, and San Diego's not the worst place in the world. So the company I was with was very regional, and my job really wouldn't have transferred. And so I started to figure out, started looking, and I literally looked on LinkedIn, which is hilarious.
Yeah.
I'm not hilarious. I'm on LinkedIn a lot, but as I looked, and GTN, Global Tax Network, was looking for a salesperson on the Western side. Now, tax, I mean, I've been in a lot of different industries, but tax wasn't something I'd never
Yeah, I
normally
was gonna say,
gravitate toward.
especially like for me, like no accounting, financial
Right.
background. Like if I were to say, all right, I'm gonna jump in, I'm gonna be in tax now. I mean,
Yeah.
was that daunting? Was that intimidating?
Well, initially it was, but then I started to understand more about the industry as I was pursuing a GTN, and I looked at mobility, and then I realized, okay, I was an expat, and I realized I may have 100 friends around the world that are expats that I've known in life,
Yeah.
and I'm like, and I realized the industry, and I understand the challenges it takes to do it, and I realized that I've botched a joint venture in Brazil because I didn't do the things between immigration and all these different things.
Yeah.
I've been held at borders because I didn't have the correct visa. And I realized I'm like, I truly can empathize with our actual employees, our experience we're trying to create for people. And I realized I understand and empathize with that. So I understood truly what we're trying to achieve. And the tax side is really, I mean, my colleagues would say, I'm not there to sell the tax. I'm there to sell them and what we do. And that's really what I do. I'm out there, I find the opportunities, I create relationships, but they're really the stars. And so I just present them and put them in the right positions.
Right.
And then mobility, it's like, I've been in some industries where fairly dry, but it's like, I think it's some of the best people out there. I mean,
Yeah.
both from, and this one of the first industries I've ever been in, where you've got corporates that mingle very closely with the vendors, and the vendors are competition, but they're frenemies, and
Right.
everybody works together. And I feel like there's a real effort trying to raise the bar of mobility, and that's evident all the time. And so for me, that once I started, and I'm like, this is an industry I can stay in for a long time, because
Yeah.
it's just great, and it's always changing, which is part of my personality I like.
Yeah, that's for sure. Well said. One final thought before I let you go, Greg, and I think it would be, instructive and helpful for people, especially first, coming into the industry, particularly in a sales role. How did you view that, when you came in, as far as, building relationships and reaching out to people, and kind of starting from scratch as far as building your network? Uh,
Yeah.
what was your approach to that?
Well, network has always been important to me, and I feel like there's a few things that are really important to me, but connecting others is really important. And I feel like I feel what I've always done in everything I've done is you give to get. And the get part's selfish, but you give out of your heart, and you give because you want to give. And I feel like if you're earnest and you try to help others, and you try to really understand what their goals are and what they're trying to do, and you do anything you can to provide value, it comes back to you in spades. And so as you network, I mean, and then you find people you really like. I mean, in the end, you may meet 1,000 people. You can't really maintain contacts with thousands of people. They're great to know, and there's reasons you want to have a connection with them. But I feel like there's probably 30, 40, 50 maybe that you can really align yourself with, and build value for each other.
Mm.
And that's what I really try to do. It's kind of like the dating game, but I feel like in the end, I feel like, and that's really, you give without expectations of receiving. And it never comes back to you in a linear fashion, because that's not how it works, but it does in some way. And if you trust that, and every day you're dedicated and you pursue what feels right to you from your heart, and you pursue just from a disciplined perspective of reaching out, that's how you build it. And I mean, I've met some wonderful people, some of the greatest people I've met in this industry from that perspective. So it's been a fun ride, and I'm looking forward to the future. I can't wait till we get together again.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, the only people I don't want to see are people like William Taylor and people like that. They're just disagreeable people. But I mean, other than that, I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, what a jerk,
He's a total jerk.
He's gonna have to watch this entire video to get to the.
Yeah, exactly, to the
I'll
end.
have to tag him, so he'll be like, "What did they say about me?" And 20 minutes later, he's gonna have to watch it. So that's too good. Well, Greg, man, I really appreciate you joining, man. This was a blast. Again, can't wait to get back together with you. But I guess this is the next best thing. So thanks again for joining me, man.
You too, Dave. Take care.
Take care. Thanks so much.